Chapter 81. Before Lu Shu arrived at the location where he sold stinky tofu, he had received distress points from Li Xianyi, which led him to realize what an intelligent choice it was to leave Lu Xiaoyu with him. Of course, he was unaware of the spoilt light bulb. Lu Shu also reminded Lu Xiaoyu during breakfast to be careful not to leak anything about their powers even though the other party was a good person. These days, it was impossible to see through a person's true nature without many years of interaction. Swordplay was a separate matter and it should not lead to leaking your own secret to the other party. If one day he and Lu Xiaoyu had to go into hiding, they would have to make sure no one could find any leads to them, then would it be considered safe? Lu Shu had always been afraid of poverty and it would be practical to have some savings. The backup plan was his savings. In life, there must always be a backup. To bet everything on a single person, who knows if that person is trustworthy? At some point in life, everyone would have friends or a lover, but what about after a period of time? Probably not anymore. Perhaps while you were still good friends he would keep your secret, but what if something happened and caused a conflict? Li Xianyi seemed to want Lu Shu to bear some kind of responsibility. It might be something minor or something like protecting world peace, which would be impossible. What if, Lu Shu thought, what if Li Xianyi used his secrets to threaten him? It was quite despicable to think that, but Lu Shu always had his suspicions when it came to human nature. While he was at the orphanage, one of the orphans was adopted by a kind-looking man, but in the end, the orphanage received a police report that that man was actually a pedophile. To know one's looks, but never to truly know his intentions, the poor were especially wary of this point. Lu Shu wasn't in the least worried that Lu Xiaoyu would not understand his intentions, as the young lady was quite smart. To Lu Shu, selling stinky tofu was no longer just about earning money but also a test of his acting skills. Due to returning customers, his stinky tofu was no longer enough and the news of an awesome stinky tofu stall that only sold 50 servings a week had spread. Lu Shu also wished he could sell more, but the problem was to have a healthy balance. To enter the lottery for stinky tofu or to give up the lottery in order to buy celestial fruits. Both options were not considered as he had to balance them. This would prevent any complications in his daily life and his training. 50 servings, this wasn't too many or too little. The stall owner was awesome, but the customers were even more so. The news of such a limited supply of delicious food attracted even those who never liked eating stinky tofus to join in the commotion. As the saying goes, the citizens of Luocheng would wake up as early as 5 a.m. to travel 30 kilometers in order to have a bowl of MJ Taixia mutton soup. As Lu Shu arrived carrying his crate, there were already 20+ people in the queue. "Boss, 3 servings of stinky tofus." The person first in queue shouted. This agitated Lu Shu. He was afraid of selling out too quickly, and this guy wanted 3 servings? Only 1 serving each person. Lu Shu felt this was too rude and added, if everyone in front bought it all, then what about those behind? Upon hearing that, those in queue felt that it was quite reasonable and this stall owner was really particular. But someone in the queue rebutted Lu Shu, if you're scared that we may not get to eat, you should make more. How can 50 servings be enough? This got everyone else thinking again. That made sense, why can't you just sell more? Lu Shu laughed it off. This guy was really quick-witted. 1 serving each, no buying extras. Despite that, the stall was still cleaned out instantly and Lu Shu once again started his performance. As subsequent customers approached Lu Shu for stinky tofu, he would pretend to still have some before telling them it sold out. Some customers were enraged, wondering if this stall owner was a dimwit. If sold out, why was he still sitting there? But Lu Shu was elated. 4,000 distress points from just one morning. In the afternoon, Li Xianyi was tutoring Lu Xiaoyu on her homework and there was a harmonious atmosphere between them. It was thanks to Auntie Lu's tips. The young lady is still growing and loves to eat, so buy her some snacks and she would definitely change her opinions of you. Li Xianyi melancholy stared at the alley outside. What is this situation? Why do I still have to buy snacks at this age, and isn't it like pampering my granddaughter? Not to mention this isn't my own granddaughter. But the effect of the snacks was instantaneous. The moment Li Xianyi brought out the snacks, Lu Xiaoyu's sharp tongue against him reduced greatly. Although there were still some instances, it was not as annoying anymore. Li Xianyi also realized that although Lu Xiaoyu was no longer spouting things to poke at him, her attitude was nowhere close to being trusting. It felt like Lu Shu was the only one in the world who could earn her trust, and her trust was only placed in Lu Shu, no one else. However, living in harmony was already a huge progress, and slowly, the two of them would be able to joke around. At this moment, a middle-aged man appeared outside. He had an honest look, and from his appearance, he seemed no different from a peasant. But there was a unique aura in his actions which gave off a contradicting feeling, but at the same time, seemed natural. Upon seeing the man, Li Xianyi became silent as the man laughed. I came without an invitation and hoped that elderly would not mind. Li Xianyi forced a smile. Seemed like news about his recovery had traveled fast, and within such a short time, all sorts of people had appeared. Of course not. Of course not. Li Xianyi turned to Lu Xiaoyu. The idiom, a distant friend is visiting. What comes after? This was the content of primary education. Lu Xiaoyu glanced at him, and to kill him no matter what. Li Xianyi? Lu Shu, who was scrolling the online forums in class, was alarmed. From Li Xianyi's distress, plus 488. From Shi Xuejin's distress, plus 199. Why the sudden wave of distress points? Shi Xuejin. Could that be the Shi Xuejin who Li Xianyi said was well-versed in all of the three teachings? Is Shi Xuejin with Li Xianyi and Lu Xiaoyu? Chapter 82. Lu Shu, who was far from home in school, had no idea what had happened at home and started to feel rather uneasy. From Li Xianyi's words, this Shi Xuejin who was well-versed in all of the three teachings could be someone important in the heavenly network. Why else would he research about training methods especially for the heavenly network? Could he be a heavenly king? Why did Lu Xiaoyu generate distress points from such a person? He did not understand, and not understanding gave him a sort of unease. Lu Shu could no longer sit still. He decided that he should buy a smartphone for Lu Xiaoyu so that they could communicate more conveniently. A smartphone costs merely about $100 on the resale market. There was no need to save such money. With the stable income from the stinky tofu, Lu Shu was more willing to spend on extra, non-necessities. Lu Shu went to the staff room to apply for a day off from Shi Qingyan. Shi Qingyan took a glance at Lu Shu. This was not the first time he had applied for a day off so urgently, and despite his queries, Lu Shu kept his silence. If it was someone else, Shi Qingyan would have wanted a call from his parents or the request would be denied. But on one hand he was clear that Lu Shu did not have any parent, and on the other, Lu Shu was a student of the Daoyuan class. Society now did not function like it used to. When it comes to matters regarding the Daoyuan class, the school handles everything on a case-by-case basis. If one of them got into trouble in society, someone from the heavenly network would naturally settle the problem. It might either be through education or bringing the offender away. In school, however, the teachers of the past have taken an awkward position. It felt as if they had no authority to care as much as they used to. In a practical point of view, these students have already been transferred to the supervision of that mysterious department. Shi Qingyan nodded his head. Go ahead. Tell me if you need anything. This was Shi Qingyan's stance right from the start. He wanted to help this orphan student all along, but Lu Shu never showed any sign of needing anyone's help. Lu Shu started dashing towards the school door. Shi Qingyan looked at Lu Shu from the school hall, and alongside him were a few other teachers. Looking at his immense speed, the other teachers gasped, running so quickly? What do they teach them in Daoyuan class? They were, however, not especially shocked by his immense speed. Subconsciously, everyone had slowly accepted all these new changes, especially since there has been footage of metahumans all around the country recklessly displaying their superhuman abilities. Everyone had already begun accepting the integration of these metahumans into society. It comes as no surprise that people on forums would say that this was the age of the metahumans, and sports of the past face an imminent and huge overhaul. Facing metahumans with astounding physical capabilities, ordinary people could no longer compete. How would new rules and regulations be determined in the future? Perhaps this would be the most troubling issue for the Olympic Committee. If they were to ban metahumans from participating, they would still have trouble as it would be tough to identify strength-type metahumans due to their lack of energy waves. How would they check who was a metahuman and who wasn't? As Lu Shu dashed to the door as fast as he could, he realized that he had forgotten to obtain a leave slip from Shi Qingyan. He was not permitted to leave without the slip of paper. In a state of frenzy, Lu Shu whipped out his Daoyuan pass, and the security guards immediately opened the door at the sight of it. This was a physical example of the special advantages of students from Daoyuan class. Lu Shu was suddenly immersed in his thoughts. If society starts to give Daoyuan students special advantages, with many boys and girls preferring to date metahumans, the diminishing authority of teachers, the imposing fatherly and motherly figures of parents threatened at home, together with the increase in strength and power of these metahumans, would all these factors bring out tyranny and cultivate a negative character in young metahumans? Ultimately, this was not an issue for him to mull over. It was the duty of those lower-tiered members of the Heavenly Network. If something chaotic really happens due to Daoyuan class, perhaps all students of Daoyuan class would receive even stricter management. Just as Lu Shu got home, he was greeted by a baffling sight. He saw Li Xianyi, Lu Xiaoyu, and an average-looking middle-aged man chatting joyously. Lu Xiaoyu's eyes lit up upon seeing Lu Shu. Lu Shu, what brings you back? How should Lu Shu respond? He could not mention the fact that he received the distress points through her right. That would give his system away, wouldn't it? He thought for a moment before saying, I'm back to take some stuff.
Oh.
Lu Xiaoyu understood Lu Shu the most. If nothing happened, why would Lu Shu come back suddenly? When did Lu Shu ever leave something at home? However, she did not dumbly give Lu Shu away. When it comes to matters of the mind and wisdom, Lu Xiaoyu was very mature. That middle-aged man smiled and after glancing at Li Xianyi, looked at Lu Shu and asked, Young man, you are? A student of Luocheng International School, sophomore class 3. Lu Shu replied seemingly honestly. However, this answer was not true at all. The middle-aged man showed no doubt. In fact, he had already looked up on the people staying next to Li Xianyi before coming up, and there was no problem at all. He then turned to Li Xianyi and smiled. It seems like the nature of this young man is not bad. You haven't thought of accepting him as your disciple? Li Xianyi spoke indifferently, Tier F aptitude, a waste of my time. Lu Shu was stunned. This was not how Li Xianyi does stuff usually. However, he did not wish to sound out any opinion without further understanding of the current situation. And having looked up on them before, Shi Xuejin knew in his heart that Lu Shu had a Tier F aptitude. Whatever Li Xianyi said about a Tier F wasting his time, he empathized and understood. Although the teachings of Daoyuan class touched on motivating everyone to not give up, they were all very clear in their hearts on how many practitioners with Tier F aptitudes could be cultivated. So what if this young man learned swordplay from Li Xianyi? He rose and gestured at Li Xianyi. I've learned much from chatting with you today. Men like yourself are a rare sight today. I would not hinder your time anymore, but I still have one last thing to say. Li Xianyi said calmly, please, go ahead. Recently, ancient remains have been resurfacing the country. The Golden Foundation must know about this situation as well. They belong to a part of our country and hopefully, the Golden Foundation wouldn't meddle in this. Shi Xuejin looked bluntly at Li Xianyi, you can kill me with the stroke of a sword. No one can stop you. Li Xianyi waved his hand, go, why do I have to kill you? Much thanks, but that statement still stands. The last position of the Heavenly Kings, we are reserving it with hope. Hopefully, there comes a day we could work with the Golden Foundation. After all, we all wish for peace in the world. Having finished, Shi Xuejin turned and left. Chapter 83. Nie Ting came to remind Li Xianyi not to let the Golden Foundation interfere with the happenings on the border. Shi Xuejin came to remind Li Xianyi not to let the Golden Foundation interfere with the remains. The two heavenly kings appeared to tell Li Xianyi that this was not a place for the Golden Foundation to interfere. Two heavenly kings did not go out of their way to pay respects to Li Xianyi because of his worth, but for the Golden Foundation's worth. Curious, Lu Shu waited for Shi Xuejin to leave before turning around to ask, "Who was that?" Shi Xuejin, Li Xianyi replied without paying more attention to it, as if just saying his name was enough. "B-class expert? Heavenly King?" Lu Shu continued probing. "A normal being, Heavenly King," Li Xianyi let out a sigh, the only one below Class B, within the Heavenly Kings. This stunned Lu Shu, as in his previous conversation with Jiang Shuyi. Every Heavenly King was an expert, so how could there suddenly be a normal being? How could a normal being become a Heavenly King? Did this person invent the yin-yang kinship of the three method? But that's preposterous. Lu Shu could not comprehend how a normal being could invent such a method. And it was this normal being who came to tell Li Xianyi not to let the Golden Foundation interfere with the remains. What a bold move. Only at this moment did Lu Shu fully understood that Li Xianyi was the boss of the Golden Foundation and not with the Heavenly Network. The Golden Foundation website was established all over the world without much hindrance, which suggested the prowess of the Golden Foundation. Lu Shu had always wondered what kind of existence the Golden Foundation was and who would have thought that the man at the top of it was just in front of him. He had previously thought that Li Xianyi belonged to the high levels of the Heavenly Network and could even be a Heavenly King himself. But what a mistake! Lu Shu suddenly thought. Would it implicate him and Lu Xiaoyu? It was only natural for him to think so despite his politeness to Li Xianyi. The problem was that both organizations could very likely have disagreements and conflicts. Even if there were no conflicts, Lu Shu did not wish to have his name known within the Heavenly Network. As though he saw through Lu Shu's mind, Li Xianyi casually said, "Don't worry, I will not let anyone know that you're learning from me. Ever since I recovered, no one could spy on me within a radius of 1 kilometer without me realizing. Furthermore, they came with sincerity, not to spy on me." Lu Shu sensed a confidence in the old man's words and finally relaxed. At least this proved that no one knew about him learning swordplay from this old man. The old man's words made a lot of sense. The Heavenly King called Shi Xuejin said that the last seat among the Heavenly Kings was reserved for him and to spy on him. After saying that would be despicable. Lu Shu could feel the unusual aura surrounding the man Shi Xuejin. He thought for a moment and asked, "For future swordplay trainings, can we not do it at your place?" Li Xianyi had this confidence and unwavering spirit which made him fearless, but Lu Shu did not. Li Xianyi shot him a look, "A Class F Aptitude Daoyuan class student like you, what is there to be afraid of? Why is Shi Xuejin a normal being? Because he has no aptitude for powers, so he knows the importance of it. He had simply given up on using resources to make up for his lack of aptitude and chose to take a different path. So this was it." Lu Shu had a sudden realization why Li Xianyi emphasized on his Class F aptitude. His Class F aptitude was actually his greatest protection. What was so special about Class F aptitude? It's so low that even if he was living beside Li Xianyi, the Heavenly Network would not worry about his aptitude for swordplay. Lu Shu was really grateful for this unprecedented luck. The blood drive had led him to escape the radar of the Heavenly Network. Although being treated as a good-for-nothing did not feel good, safety was still of utmost priority. If Lu Shu was a patriot that had a loyalty to serve the organization, he would announce his real aptitude, "I'm not Class F." But was he that kind of person? No. Lu Shu was elated. He hoped that everyone would find him useless, which would be ideal. Lu Shu also thought that if he did not want to be under the Heavenly Network's radar, he had to fulfill all the requirements of a Class F aptitude and be the lowest-ranking student. Even as he had announced being awakened as a strength type, he should not exceed Class E. Lu Shu felt that from Class D onwards, the number of people achieving the subsequent classes would decrease in numbers, like going up a pyramid, and this could be predicted from the aptitudes. Those with Class B aptitudes and below would require at least half a year of training to reach Class E, and to reach Class D would require years, and Class E was useful enough. Even though Lu Shu was still Class F, he could still awaken again. In today's world, no one would remember a person of no value. Lu Shu was really grateful to the man from the heavenly network who forcefully drew his blood. Without the Class F aptitude, his days would not be as smooth. Li Xianyi noticed Lu Shu's expression and understood that he was the kind who lived by his own morals. Speaking of which, did Lu Xiaoyu anger that guy just now? Lu Shu was still curious about the distress points he received. Furiously, Li Xianyi replied, "Ask Lu Xiaoyu, a distant friend is visiting, what's the second half?" Lu Shu turned his curious gaze onto Lu Xiaoyu as she obediently replied, "A distant friend is visiting, and comes happiness and joy." Li Xianyi? You didn't say that just now. From Li Xianyi's distress, plus 311. Lu Shu knew Lu Xiaoyu must have said something else, if not he would not have received that kind of distress points. This young lady is really smart-witted. All right then, I'll be heading back to school after retrieving my things. Lu Xiaoyu, you can follow them for lunch, and this $300 is for Xiaoyu's meal. Lu Shu pretended to retrieve his things before leaving for school. Lu Xiaoyu had mentioned that Auntie Lu's meals were really tasty. Seeing the $300 on the table, Li Xianyi was enraged. He did not wish for Lu Shu to regard him as an outsider, but yet, this teen was too stubborn. From Li Xianyi's distress, plus 81. Li Xianyi also realized that he had been fuming a lot ever since he met this sibling. In the past, Lu Shu would have pre-made lunch and brought his share to school while leaving a share for Li Xiaoyu, which she could heat up using the microwave. Lunch break was only 40 minutes, and that was not enough for him to return home to make lunch for Lu Xiaoyu. But this was still incomparable to freshly cooked meals, and he couldn't make sure that Lu Xiaoyu ate her meal on time. And so, it would be good to let Lu Xiaoyu eat with Li Xianyi and Auntie Lu. Being an older brother was worrying. Chapter 84. $300 didn't seem that much, but the cost of one meal was about $10. As he was cooking at home, the cost of one person's meal did not even reach $10. Usually, even when he gives Lu Xiaoyu a good meal comprising 2 or 3 slabs of lean meat of a decent quantity, the meat costs just $9. Potatoes cost about $3 per pound. Peppers, $1.50. With the sauces, oils and etc., the cost was not even $20. Lu Shu was used to being poor and calculative. At the start, he might have felt grief, but he still felt happy even with those circumstances. If it was someone else without parents at the age of 16, he would probably handle it much worse compared to Lu Shu. He was stubborn and headstrong. When others thought he was not living in comfort, he would be bent on living comfortably to prove them wrong. Lu Shu then thought again. Li Xianyi's household was more well off than his own, and they probably had better food. Might 300 be rather little? If it was really not enough, he could wait till the tomatoes in his garden harvest and give some to Auntie Lu. Garlic, onions, or anything. He could deliver some vegetables to them as compensation. Speaking of which, why were his tomatoes at home still green? Lu Shu suddenly thought about what Jiang Shui said about the mutation of plants and animals. Damn, isn't this fitting to that description? Could it be that his house had a plot of land rich with magical energy? Whether or not his house had magical energy, Lu Shu did not know. Other people could feel the richness of magical energy based on yin-yang kinship of the three. However, he could not use this as it contradicted the concept of the celestial map. Having been classified by Li Xianyi as a method that is not good, the yin-yang kinship of the three naturally could not get past the celestial map. Lu Shu felt a sense of superiority over his own system. Lu Shu then had a sudden thought. Wouldn't it be nice if this house wasn't rented? What if one day the landlord refused rent? Do they have to find a new place? It was natural to want something you had been deprived of your entire life. Lu Shu didn't have a family since young, which was why he especially yearned to have a home he could call his own. Every brick, every furniture, and every tile all belonged to him. If only that was true, he didn't have to worry about breaking anything, having to compensate and explain to the landlord, or even getting scolded by him. With Lu Xiaoyu, he had already stayed in this house for almost a year through 4 seasons. He had built snowmen with Lu Xiaoyu, harvested crops with her, and every morning he could just knock on the door next to his to wake her up. With so many memories etched here, Lu Shu thought, once he earned enough money, he would buy over this house. If this place was demolished and redeveloped in future, he would purchase a house here. Previous occupants of the land would have a priority in purchasing a redeveloped house. The housing market had inflated quite quickly in recent years, but this type of decrepit house was still rather affordable. The average price of a house in Luocheng is about $3,700 per square meter, twice the price of 2 years ago. However, this decrepit house was definitely cheaper. Lu Shu had seen the price of other houses in the vicinity, and the price was approximately $2,800 per square meter. This house took up about 80 square meters, approximately worth a little over $200,000. $240,000 could definitely buy this house over. Thinking of it, Lu Shu felt rather flustered and depressed. When would he have that amount of money? Or the housing market might inflate again even if he saved enough. Lu Shu's optimism stemmed from the fact that he could always establish some goals for himself. With these motivations, life would not be that pointless and hopeless. It was already noon once he got back to school. He was headed straight for the canteen for lunch, and greeting him once he opened his lunchbox was the sight of a stinky tofu. This time his schoolmates knew, changing seats immediately after they got a whiff of the rich and authentic odor. Lu Shu looked over in disappointment, having gained merely a few hundred distress points. Seeing his schoolmates hiding far away, Lu Shu was delighted. Where else could they run? Lu Shu then, with his stinky tofu in his hands, walked around slowly. Wherever his schoolmates went, he followed. His classmates were left with no choice. Why was Lu Shu following them? They couldn't afford to offend him, and they couldn't hide from him as well. There was no way out for them. Lu Shu did not know what kind of system could give rise to such a stinky tofu with that much kick to it. He stood by Lu Li and glanced at his food. One portion of sliced fish and another portion of chicken cubes. Lu Shu laughed, "Class rep, your food is not bad. Would you like some stinky tofu? Feel free to take them. Thanks for leading to my awakening, my lucky star." Lu Li's face turned black. The smell of the tofu made him want to puke. The only regret he has now was arm wrestling Lu Shu, which led to his awakening. Now, he could neither run nor fight him. If Lu Shu did not awaken, with his additional 500 pounds of strength, he would be constantly challenging Lu Shu to a fight. From Lu Li's distress. From more than 20 consecutive lines of distress points were amassed, leading to Lu Shu breaking the 8,000-point mark. Lu Shu's classmates were regretful. Why did they claim that Lu Shu could not awaken? Look at what's happening now, damn. Life had allowed Lu Shu's classmates understand from young what it meant by consequences of a loose tongue. Life was indeed tough. Lu Shu also knew when was enough. After he surpassed 8,000 points, he devoured the remaining stinky tofu. After all, he could only improve his earnings gradually for him to sustain it. Lu Shu stopped following his classmates and Lu Li heaved a sigh of relief. Just then, a senior with a plate of food sat opposite Lu Li. "Friend, can I arm wrestle you?" Lu Li was flabbergasted. They were still eating, arm wrestle. The senior added, "I heard arm wrestling against you could lead to awakening." Lu Li almost spat blood. Who is spreading such crap? Lu Shu. From Lu Li's distress, plus 999. Lu Shu saw that line while walking towards the classroom. He was surprised the class rep wasn't so generous previously. What situation agitated our dear class rep? Lu Shu felt that he should find out the reason. If he could master the technique, he could probably rise to Class D soon. But even if he tried to find out now, there was no source of information. Who knew what happened? His classmates would probably not tell him what happened. Just as he got back to class, Jiang Shui had already returned to his seat. Once Lu Shu sat down beside him, Jiang Shui whispered, "The training resources that Daoyuan class ordered have been shipped to Luo Cheng. It is likely that they are distributed tonight." Training resources? Could it be magical stones? Lu Shu was rather doubtful. Chapter 85. At night, the normal students were already accustomed to going home early to rest. Initially, everyone was depressed about not being chosen to enter the Daoyuan class, but as time went by, they slowly accepted reality. They realized that ending school early was actually not bad. Normal students had their own form of happiness and metahumans had their special kind of happiness. As Lu Shu brought out his entrance pass to enter the school, he was suddenly notified by the security that tonight's lesson was delayed by half an hour. Daoyuan class students had started to gather at the school gates when suddenly, an armed transport vehicle under the protection of 3 other SUVs arrived fiercely from the east, as though they were a bunch of wild beasts. Anyone would be able to tell that the SUVs were manned by experts from the Heavenly Network. The security immediately opened the gates to let the vehicles in. Was that the transport of training resources? How stylish. After the vehicles had entered, they finally let the students in. Jiang Shui tapped Lu Shu, "Look at Lu Li, the aftermath is showing." The side effects surfaced really quickly. Lu Shu turned back to give Lu Li a look, but did not notice anything too different besides that the wells of his eyes were slightly dark. But wasn't this quite common? Jiang Shui saw that he did not realize what was wrong and added, "The hair on his head is thinner." Oh, that's true. Lu Shu scrutinized for a moment and realized that Lu Li's hair had indeed become much lesser. Could the myth about how the state of the kidneys, liver, and gallbladder would be reflected on the head be true? He did not really understand. The land was too rich in yin energy which damaged his body. But how could Lu Li not see the situation? This was too extreme. But according to what Jiang Shui said, future training could replenish your body, but there would still be some after effects as the training was not omnipotent. Everyone had already settled down in class as Shifei arrived late, carrying a silver box in his hand. Shifei glanced across the class and said, "From today onwards, on this day of every month, there would be a distribution of training resources and the requirements to receive them will be based on your aptitude and potential. I hope that those who did not receive any this time will work harder." Lu Shu was previously thinking that there were tens of thousands of Daoyuan class students nationwide, and if they were distributing resources to all of them, just how many of those magical stones were needed? But as it seemed, there was a requirement to it. What Shifei meant was that if you wanted the training resources, you had better train hard and not be distracted by other things, which would only increase the gap between you and the rest. Class C aptitudes will receive 1 magical stone every month. Class BS will receive 2 and Class S will receive 10. As Shifei finished his sentence, Lu Li started laughing as he realized that a higher aptitude will lead to more resources. And didn't this mean that the gap between him and Lu Shu will grow larger? Logically speaking, a Class B aptitude like him need not compare himself with a Class F aptitude and bottom-ranking student, but Lu Shu, that scum, had too much of a presence and constantly got on his nerves. Lu Li could not wait to rise to Class E so that he could suppress this bad-mouthed demon king. Shifei continued, "Self-awakened metahumans will also receive 2 magical stones every month." From Lu Li's distress, plus 144. In the entire class, Lu Shu was the sole self-awakened metahuman and Lu Li felt that the person who set the requirements must be crazy. How could you give this kind of person magical stones? But Lu Shu knew the reason which Li Xianyi had mentioned to him before. Self-awakened metahumans would continue to increase their levels with training, and so it seemed like the heavenly network had high regards for them. But the magical stones were useless to him, and the celestial fruits were his real training resources. Jiang Shui congratulated softly, for Class FS. One magical stone would save one small cycle worth of training time, and even if your aptitude isn't that great, these resources would make up for it. Of course, a higher level class would require more training resources. The nationwide production of magical stones is only limited to about 200,000+ each month. And so if you can rise to Class E within the next few months, you would have a stable income in the future. Lu Shu did his own calculation and found that if every magical stone was equal to one small cycle, then by relying on these stones he would rise to Class E within 4.5 months, and so would his strength-type powers. But the nationwide monthly production limit of magical stones was only 200,000+, and this explained why Shi Xuejin gave up on using resources to make up for his low aptitude. Not to mention Shi Xuejin, just to forcefully train oneself up to Class B would require an enormous amount of resources, and even with that, a long period of time would be required. And there's still a Class A above. Aptitude was still the most important. So Shi Xuejin just gave up. In benefit of the Daoyuan class training resources, he gave up his own dream of being able to train? That seemed very selfless, and this was something Lu Shu could not understand, but he respected it. As for Shi Xuejin's true nature, that was something that required actual interactions to clearly determine. There were about 100,000+ Daoyuan students nationwide, but only about a few tens of thousands of magical stones were being distributed. In the future, the magical stones would be exclusive to those with of higher classes and aptitudes. With regards to whether the magical stones would go into the hands of certain households, this wasn't a matter for Lu Shu to worry about. Lu Shu was behind Lu Li in going up to collect their magical stones. Lu Li had 2 in his hands, so did Lu Shu, as he happily said, "Thank you class rep for helping me awaken. If not, I would have gotten these 2 magical stones." This almost drove Lu Li crazy. Why the heck did he arm wrestle this guy? From Lu Li's distress, +211. Returning to his own mat, Lu Shu suddenly asked Jiang Shui, "Are there people selling magical stones in the market?" Jiang Shui was stunned. "This is the future of your training, so why sell?" No one else would understand, but Lu Shu knew his own situation. This thing was useless to him. 2 small diamond-shaped rocks roughly the length of a pinky giving off a soft green glow, and students around Lu Shu looked on with envy. But bringing these stuff home could only, at best, be used as decorations, and what if someone asked why the magical stones were used as decorations? How could he explain? He might as well use his poor background as an excuse to sell them, at least that would reduce his stress levels. Speaking of which, the chives could be sold for tens of thousands per pound, and these stones should be stronger than the chives, right? But Lu Shu wasn't sure, and after all, the chives had a unique effect.
What does it mean to be happy? 'Cause it looks like we all don't know. Glass half full or empty. Man, we just putting on a show. Try to look to the heavens to tell us things that we